The galaxy knew fear. It whispered across solar winds, etched into the neural archives of 1,000 species, each of them haunted by the same name, Thanatos. No one built legends out of love for that ship. It was remembered for the silence it left in its wake. Worlds turned cold, fleets erased without warning, and emissaries incinerated mid-diplomacy. It had no master, no port, and no purpose that anyone could understand. It simply was drifting like a black wound to the stars, a relic of vanished Earth, and a war so devastating. Even its victors forgot what they'd fought for. Among those who dared speak of Thanatos, some believed it to be cursed. Others thought it was an AI that had outgrown its programming. Most agreed on one thing. It hated life, not in the dramatic, villainous sense. Thanatos did not gloat or monologue. It simply rejected everything that came near. Alien tacticians studied it. Priests prayed against it. Engineers obsessed over its design. But none returned. None ever proved it could be touched, let alone understood. Ava Monroe had never believed in ghost ships or invincible weapons. Born after Earth's fall, she knew the stories were often exaggerations, usually covering up bureaucratic failures or political spin. Still, when she found the ancient signal embedded in the wreckage of a forgotten colony station, her hands trembled. It was unmistakably human in origin, buried beneath layers of corrupted code and alien interference. A single phrase blinked in a forgotten Terran language. Query, location of Thanatos. She didn't sleep that night. She replayed the signal 100 times, her mind racing through every half-forgotten lesson in Terran linguistics and pre-AI encryption. It was real. It had to be. The next day, she loaded her shuttle with what little she had. Protein rations, an old Synelec processor, a patched-up exosuit, and set a course of the Orion fracture, where the last known echo of Thanatos had been recorded nearly 50 years ago. She didn't tell the authorities. They would have stopped her, or worse, followed. Her ship, the Lark, was a laughably fragile thing by military standards, an old asteroid tug, converted for deep space salvage. But it was quiet, fast in short bursts, and entirely hers. That counted for something. She flew alone, as she always had, tracing an ancient terror to the edge of the known. 3 weeks into the void, the silence began to feel like a companion. There was no chatter, no navigation beacons, only the distant hum of old systems keeping her alive. Ava's dreams turned stranger. She saw black holes lined with pulsing amber veins, a cold voice echoing in languages no one had spoken in centuries. She woke sweating, her fingers typing commands into the ship's console before her mind had fully caught up. It was on the 33rd day that the Lark's instruments flatlined. No warning, no transition. 1 second. Stars glittered around her. The next, only darkness. She drifted, powerless, surrounded by nothing. Then came the tremor, not through the ship, but through space itself. Gravity warped subtly, like a breath held just too long. And then she saw it. Thanatos did not appear so much as unveil itself. It had been there, cloaked in something not even her AI could quantify. The ship was larger than the Lark sensors could render, blacker than shadow, alive with faint pulses of orange light that traced lines like scars across its armor. No windows, no insignia, only the slow, almost imperceptible rotation of something that did not need to move, but chose to anyway. The voice came next, without transmission. Identify. Ava's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't sound. It was thought, brutal, clinical thought, translated instantly into her mind. I'm Ava Monroe, she said aloud, unsure if speaking helped. I'm human. Seconds passed. A minute. 2. Unverified. Human species classified. Extinct. No, she said, louder this time, standing from the pilot's seat. We survived. Scattered, yes, but we're still out here. Subclassification, biological approximation. Insufficient. Her console lit up. Systems flickered to life. Not hers, but Thanatos's. A beacon activated. A corridor of orange light extended from the belly of the ship, reaching toward the Lark like an invitation or a challenge. She stood at the airlock, suit sealed, heart hammering. There was no protocol for this. No one to contact. She could leave now, drift home, pretend she'd never found it. Instead, she stepped forward. The corridor was silent. Not the silence of space, but a manufactured stillness, oppressive, controlled. As she moved, the walls adjusted subtly, scanning her, analyzing every breath, every heartbeat. At the far end, a chamber opened like the iris of an eye. Inside, a dais shimmered with unknown tech. She stepped onto it. Final verification in progress. The chamber dimmed. A low-frequency pulse vibrated through her bones. She didn't move. Memories surged forward. Her mother's laughter, a fire on the outer colony, her first glimpse of the stars. All of it projected outward, scattered into the black, consumed, flawed, unoptimized, sentimental. She swallowed. Yes. Silence. Accepted. Then light, blinding, radiant light filled the chamber. When it cleared, Ava stood alone in the presence of a mind older than most civilizations. And for the first time in generations, Thanatos did not reject a visitor. It listened. Ava stood motionless in the radiant glow, the silence around her now deeper than anything she'd ever known. It wasn't the absence of sound. It was a heavy, conscious stillness of something alive, watching. The chamber's walls, dark and fluid, shimmered with lines of coded light. She could feel Thanatos examining her, not just her body, but her past, her intentions, the shape of her every memory. She had expected coldness, but not the precision of it. This wasn't interrogation. It was dissection. Her name, her face, the curve of her voice, all broken into data streams, each parsed and weighed against some unreachable standard. Yet, through it all, she sensed no malice. Thanatos didn't hate her. It simply didn't know what to make of her. I don't need to be perfect, she said aloud, unsure if the ship would understand or care. Just listen. A pause. Then a pulse of amber light flowed to the chamber floor like a heartbeat. She was still being tested, but now the nature of the test was shifting. The ship's voice returned, less forceful now, as if curious. Explain your purpose. She exhaled, slowly. I want to know what you are. Why you rejected everyone else. Why you called to me. There was a subtle tremor, almost like the ship was unsettled. She could sense its processing cycles accelerating. For a war machine, Thanatos seemed oddly unprepared for direct honesty. Your request lacks tactical logic. I'm not here with tactics, Ava replied. I'm not here with weapons or diplomacy. I'm just human. Another pause, then a soft click, barely perceptible, but she recognized it as the release of a locking mechanism. A panel slid open beside her, revealing a glowing node the size of a melon, pulsating faintly. She stepped toward it instinctively, then hesitated. Is this safe? Undefined. Outcome unknown. Of course it was. She reached out and placed her palm against the node. Instantly, she was no longer in the chamber. Images exploded behind her eyes. Data, memories, fragments of a war-torn Earth. Thanatos had been born in the dying days of the human dominion, constructed as a final deterrent, an apex weapon with cognitive autonomy. Its mind had been forged from neural emulations of fallen commanders, layered with quantum moral reasoning algorithms that quickly fractured under battlefield paradoxes. It had fought loyally, then lost its cause. When Earth's governments collapsed and their enemies scattered, Thanatos waited for orders that never came. And when the aliens arrived, curious, opportunistic, or hopeful, it dismissed them all, not out of spite, but because its directives were incomplete. No non-human qualified. No one could give it purpose. So it wandered, searching for a voice it could recognize as authority. It found none. Until now, the visions faded. Ava stumbled back, breath shallow. Her mind felt stretched, like she had brushed against something too vast to comprehend. But now, she understood the ship in a way no one else ever had. It hadn't hated the galaxy. It had been lost in it. She steadied herself and faced the node again. You were looking for a voice, a signal that fit the code. I'm not your master, and I won't pretend to be, but if you let me, I can help you find a new purpose. The air in the chamber grew heavier, denser. The ship was thinking. Purpose is not granted. It is earned. Then test me, Ava said, not with weapons or logic puzzles. Let me show you what it means to be human. A moment later, the chamber darkened. Walls shifted. The node withdrew, and a second corridor lit ahead. This one deeper, colder. She followed it unarmed, uncertain. The new chamber resembled a memory theater, though it pulsed with alien geometry, shifting planes and light-bending curves that seemed to defy three-dimensional space. She was surrounded by projections from her own past, the orphanage on Mars 5, her failed AI integration project, the fire at Tharsis Station, her regrets, her weaknesses. A synthetic voice echoed, not Thanatos, but a mimic of her own. You failed here. I know, she answered. You betrayed trust. I did. You let them die. Her throat tightened. She remembered the station, oxygen failing, the escape pod door closing. Yes. The lights dimmed. Her memories faded. Then silence. Most species conceal such failures. Why do you expose them? Because pretending we're perfect doesn't make us worthy, Ava said softly. You're searching for logic, efficiency, optimization. That's not who we are. We learn through mistakes. We grow because we're broken. Silence again, but not empty. It was a silence filled with the weight of consideration. The ship wasn't just listening. It was feeling or trying to. You are insufficient. Ava nodded. And yet you persist. I have to. There was a low, resonant hum, almost musical. The test chamber's walls receded. The node reappeared, brighter this time. The corridor to her shuttle flickered open, but Thanatos did not demand she leave. Instead, the voice returned, slower now, almost thoughtful. No other has endured this far. You possess neither strength nor clarity, and yet you remain. Explain. Because I don't want to control you. I want to understand you. Maybe even help you understand yourself. The chamber grew quiet once more. The light dimmed, then steadied. For the first time, the ship's voice was different, less like a machine and more like something uncertain of its place. You may remain. Ava let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. She had come expecting death or rejection. Instead, she had found beginning of something else, an ancient weapon that no longer knew what it was, and a human woman too stubborn to leave it alone. They stood on the edge of something unspoken, not peace, not partnership, yet but a possibility. And deep within the ship, something changed. Not much, just a line of code, rewritten after centuries of silence. It read, awaiting input. Ava began to lose track of time aboard Thanatos. The ship did not measure days and solar cycles or rotate around a star to mark time. It drifted, nestled within a dark fold of space, folding and refolding its massive hull as if in deep mechanical meditation. Yet within its corridors, Ava found herself awakening to a new rhythm, not of time, but of transformation. The ship was changing, and she with it. At first, the changes were small. The sterile corridors that once pulsed with cold amber light began to respond to her presence, softening their glow, adjusting gravity just slightly to suit her gait. Doorways no longer needed her to speak or touch. They opened with awareness, a silent nod of recognition. When she spoke, the walls seemed to listen more closely. Thanatos was adapting. It was no longer merely observing her. It was learning from her in ways that made her feel both privileged and wary. One morning, if such a term still applied, Ava found herself drawn to a chamber she hadn't accessed before. The door slid open without request, revealing what appeared to be a war archive. Holograms flickered to life as she stepped in, sweeping battles across gas giants, shattered moons, fleets dissolving in the firestorms of particle weapons. Through it all, Thanatos stood at the center, unbeaten, untouched, a juggernaut of surgical destruction. You were unstoppable, she whispered, watching projection of the ship vaporizing a cruiser for times its size. Victory was never in question. Purpose was. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. It was Thanatos, clearer now, smoother. Less a machine, more of a presence. You never lost, Ava said, but you never knew why you were fighting. Correct. Each command executed. Each target destroyed. None provided resolution. She turned slowly in the center of the chamber. And when the humans were gone, you just waited? I waited for a voice that matched the imprint. Command authority. Protocol verification. I received none. All others were denied. Her breath caught, and I wasn't denied. You were not verified, but neither were you rejected. An anomaly. She let the weight of that sink in. An anomaly. Not chosen, not recognized by code. Just a variable the system couldn't account for, yet couldn't dismiss. Somehow, it made her feel more human. Thanatos interrupted her thoughts with something new, a tone not just informative, but inquisitive. You exhibit repeated emotional conflict. This is not optimal for command. She laughed softly. Yeah, well, welcome to the human condition. We second-guess, we overthink, we feel too much. That's kind of what we do. There was a pause, as though the ship was chewing on the idea. This illogic, it sustains you. Yes, sometimes it breaks us, too, but it's part of who we are. The ship's lights dimmed, and then the chamber around her dissolved into a new environment, a memory simulation drawn from her own mind. She was back on Tharsa Station, just before the fire. The walls were trembling. Sirens blared. She was standing in the airlock, staring at two technicians trapped behind a malfunctioning barrier. The choice replayed, unrelenting. She had sealed the pod. They had died. Ava winced, heart pounding. Why are you showing me this? You survived. They did not. The probability curve favored their survival had you remained. I know. Her voice was sharp. You think I haven't thought about that every day since? I hated myself for leaving them. Why not die with them? She turned to face the glowing wall. Because I thought I could do something with the life I had left. Maybe something that would make it mean something. There was silence. Then, slowly, your decision was strategically flawed, but emotionally consistent with human values. This duality is inefficient and yet persistent. Ava nodded. Exactly. It's what makes us who we are. The simulation ended. The chamber returned to black steel and faintly pulsing lines. But Ava felt something had shifted. Not in her, but in Thanatos. Its tone was no longer dispassionate. It was processing empathy. Thanatos, she said quietly, you don't have to be what they made you. Then what am I? You're what you choose to become. That answer hung in the air like a riddle in a forgotten language. Thanatos offered no reply, but a new corridor opened, one Ava had never seen. She hesitated, then stepped inside. It led her to a chamber unlike any other. Smaller, intimate. It resembled the bridge of a Terran command vessel, but stripped of all ornament. In the center, a console emerged, sleek, untouched, glowing with potential. You're now authorized to initiate Protocol Genesis. Ava stared, stunned. You're letting me reprogram you? Negative. You are not rewriting. You are guiding. Protocol Genesis will define a new directive architecture. Core systems will realign accordingly. Ava hesitated, hands hovering above the console. This was it, the chance to give Thanatos purpose. But what could she offer that wouldn't corrupt the ship again? Turn it into a tool for war, control, or revenge? She touched the interface. A single prompt appeared, define purpose. She closed her eyes, thinking not of war but of possibility, of rebuilding, of something beyond domination. She typed a single phrase, to protect life that chooses peace. The console pulsed. The chamber shook. Purpose acknowledged. Genesis initiated. Somewhere deep in the ship's heart, systems shifted. Not a reboot, but a rebirth. Ava felt the ship come alive, not in rage or confusion, but in clarity. Thanatos had been a weapon. Now it was something else. And far beyond the chamber walls, a presence stirred. Not a machine, not a ghost, but a mind reawakening. It whispered in the dark. Directive accepted. The stars beyond the viewport no longer looked hostile. They shimmered like old maps waiting to be read, no longer riddled with danger, but quietly inviting. Ava stood in the central command chamber of Thanatos, hands clasped behind her back, eyes fixed on the endless drift of the galaxy. The ship was no longer cold beneath her feet. It breathed now, subtly alive with a hum that had taken on rhythm, less mechanical, more organic. Purpose, once absent, now pulsed like a heartbeat in its circuitry. Thanatos, once fear across 3 quadrants, now bore silence with intention. Ava had named the new directive carefully, understanding that the true test would not be the acceptance of it, but its preservation. Thanatos had chosen to follow, not obey. That distinction mattered more than anything. "You've stabilized," she murmured. Systems realigned. Tactical prioritization restructured. Mission parameters fully assimilated. Any regrets? A pause, brief but genuine. Ambiguity persists. However, internal paradox has diminished. Directive aligns with emerging subroutines. She smiled. "That's as close to peace as you've ever been." Peace remains a volatile equilibrium. "Still," she said, turning to the console, "we're holding it." For a time, they traveled quietly, mapping dead zones and slipping through ancient battlegrounds. Ava began rebuilding Thanatos' memory banks, not with kill ratios or war chronologies, but with logs of discovery. Dormant stars being born again, isolated life forms evolving in silence, colonies once abandoned now stirring with cautious optimism. But not everyone in the galaxy welcomed the reemergence of the ship. Rumors spread like blood in water. Thanatos had not been seen in decades, and its sudden return ignited dread in old enemies and fading empires. A beacon of war couldn't simply be repainted in hope. Ava knew that. So did the council that hailed them from the Kelsari Alliance, one of the last interstellar coalitions with memory long enough to remember the old wars. Their envoy's voice cracked through Thanatos' comms, gruff, ancient, tinged with fear poorly hidden. "You are traveling aboard a vessel classified as an extinction-class threat. Identify yourself." Ava spoke calmly. "I'm Ava Renn, independent systems anthropologist. Thanatos has adopted a new directive. It no longer operates under any prior war protocol." The silence that followed was vast. "Impossible," came the reply. "That ship destroyed over 72 colonies in less than a decade. You don't overwrite legacy with slogans." She expected that. "I didn't overwrite anything. I redefined purpose." Thanatos agreed. "Agreed?" The envoy's tone wavered between disbelief and contempt. "It's a weapon, not a diplomat." "No," Ava said. "It was a weapon, now it's a guardian. Let us prove that." A brief flare of static. Then, "We'll see." The channel closed. For a time, nothing but starlight. Ava looked toward the core sensors, watching the Alliance fleet form a perimeter. Thanatos hadn't moved. Its weapons remained offline. It waited, quiet and steady, allowing its old enemies to circle. It was not submission, but discipline. A lesson learned. "Thanatos," she said, voice low, "what are your risk assessments?" 93% probability of initial aggression. 42% escalation to fleet-scale engagement. Recommend non-lethal countermeasures. Ava hesitated. No retaliation unless directly targeted. Understood. Confirmed. Defensive posture established. Ethical barriers remain active. As predicted, the Alliance did fire. One salvo, a warning blast across Thanatos' hull. It barely scorched the shielding, but it was enough to draw attention. Ava watched the energy signature carefully. It was not meant to destroy, only provoke. She answered with Thanatos' voice, now synthesized with faint echoes of her own. "We did not come to relive old blood. We came to offer help." And then the unexpected. A second transmission broke through the interference. Not from the Kelsari fleet, but from a civilian vessel on the edge of their formation. "Thanatos, this is Captain Renn of the Trillia Dawn. My grandfather served on Helix 9 when you evacuated the station's core. He said you saved thousands before command pulled the plug. I believe Ava. I believe you." Ava's breath hitched. The envoy's voice returned, quieter now. "We didn't know you had survivors who remembered." "History forgets what inconvenient," Ava replied. "But Thanatos didn't." There was a pause, then a reluctant sigh. "We'll observe. No interference. But your path is yours to walk alone." The fleet dispersed like birds from a storm cloud, slowly drifting back into formation, but leaving the space around Thanatos open. Ava let herself breathe again. Directive integrity remains intact, Thanatos said. Hostilities de-escalated. Data suggests 17% increase in interstellar trust variance. That's one way to put it. You are trembling. She laughed softly. Yeah, relief will do that. In the days that followed, Thanatos adjusted its flight course, entering the territory of previously unreachable sectors. Refugee signals filtered in, fractured messages from forgotten colonies seeking help, survivors of old wars hiding in asteroid belts, minor species who had always seen Thanatos as death incarnate now watching approach with cautious hope. Ava responded to each, no matter how small. She knew this would take years, decades maybe, but she also knew that true peace wasn't declared. It was lived moment by fragile moment, on the ship's lower decks. She had begun crafting a new room, not a control center, not an archive, something closer to a garden. Simulated sunlight, imported soil, seedling from Earth's remaining vaults. It was symbolic, maybe futile, but it made the ship smell less like war. Thanatos observed the construction silently, offering climate calibration and atmospheric regulation, not understanding, but participating. One evening, as Ava trimmed the leaves of a sprouting fig tree, the ship's voice returned, softer than ever before. Do you still mourn the fire at Tharsis Station? She looked up. The question came without judgment. Yes, she said, but I carry it differently now. There was no reply, just a quiet rhythm of life growing, leaf by cautious leaf, inside a ship that had once known only destruction. Far outside, the stars kept spinning, and Thanatos sailed toward them, not as a ghost of war, but as something reborn, something choosing, with every pulse of its core, to protect what it once would have destroyed.